Let's get this show on the road. I'll call to the order the WRCOG Executive Committee meeting, and I'm going to ask Laura to lead the Pledge of Allegiance for us.
Would you stand and join me in the pledge to our flag? Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So Janice, do you want to do the roll now?
I am still checking everybody in. If those that are not here, I'm checking them out.
Okay.
But we can go ahead and go through with it, and then I'll just mark them after.
Okay, sounds good. Do we have any requests to speak? Do we have any public comment?
I have no requests.
Moreno Valley wants to speak, but they're not part of the public, so. Yeah, you did. I'm going to cancel your button.
Just off a quick head count, sir, we do have quorum.
Oh, yay.
Yes, sir.
That's always a good thing. So no public comment. We'll move on to minutes. We have minutes, summary minutes from July 2nd. And unless anyone has questions about the minutes, someone can make a motion and a second. And then please cast your votes. If the little bar at the top of your screen is flashing yellow, it means you haven't cast your vote yet.
And I'm just going to do a verbal as I see it on the screen as far as attendance. City of Riverside, City of San Jacinto, City of Temecula, District 1, Western Municipal Water District, District 2 and 5, Temecula is present, and Morongo Band of Mission Indians.
She's right on time.
Just confirming those that are not here, sir. Thank you.
All right. So can you tabulate the vote there? All right, the minutes are approved on a vote of 16-0. We'll move down to the consent calendar. Consent calendar items will be taken in one block vote, items 5A through 5G, unless someone wants to pull an item, to make comments, ask questions, or if there are public comment. Okay, I'm not getting any requests to pull any items, so we have a motion by Murrieta and a second by Moreno Valley to approve the consent calendar.
City of Eastville, thank you, sir.
Yeah, well, yeah. All right, thank you. Consent calendar is approved, 16-0, no abstentions. We'll move on down now to reports and discussion, the items under 6, and got a lot of stuff under 6A. Is Aaron Sassy here?
Yeah.
Aaron, why don't you come up? We'll do you first, 6B, and get you out of the way, because you probably don't want to stick around for. Oh.
Glad I was here on time. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Aren't you always?
Not always. I try. When you live close, sometimes you run late, right?
Yes.
Anyways, the legislature is back from their summer recess, and it will be pretty busy for the next month because they have to pretty much act on all the bills in the next couple of weeks. So just a couple of items. I know it's been a little bit since we've talked, but AB 1912 is that JPA bill that I've talked to you about many times. Well, I finally have some good news on that front. It looks like it has been amended. It has removed the joint and several liability provisions. So basically at this point, if a JPA were to disband, all of the local agencies would have to figure out how to share the liabilities of that, but it's not just forcing you to take on all liabilities. So much better version of the bill. It's currently in suspense, but we know it will be taken off and probably move forward, but we're definitely in a much better place with that bill. One item that I do want to make sure that you're all paying attention to, and I know I sent this out to all of your city managers, but there are some proposed regulations relating to cannabis, and basically at this point the state is proposing that all cities would have to allow for deliveries within your city. In addition, it would also implement a 10-day clock for verification of licenses, and if you don't meet that timeline, that 10 days, then the license would be automatically approved. So I definitely would recommend that all of you are submitting letters on this. For everything. So it's going to require you to accept deliveries, taking away your local control, but also basically saying if you don't respond to a license application within 10 days, then it's automatically approved. So definitely want to encourage all of you to get some letters in on this. There is a hearing on this in LA on August 14th, if you want to send anybody. It doesn't sound like you would have a whole lot of time to at least get your comments out there. It might be a matter of 30 seconds or so, but I would definitely recommend getting a letter in if nothing else. Our next division meeting is September 12th at our annual conference. This year we're doing a lunch. We've always done a breakfast on Friday morning. We're trying a lunch on Wednesday, so I know that might change some of your plans in terms of travel. So 11:45 on Wednesday, we'll start our lunch. We're taking all of our nominations and applications for our executive committee for our division right now. So if any of you are interested in serving on that, please send in the application that I sent out, and we'll be doing our elections at that lunch. So get involved. We need you. Adam, it looks like you have a question.
On the cannabis, I heard you say act, and then I heard you say respond. Those are two different things. So is it like respond, like we got your application, we're reviewing it, and that?
If you don't respond, then it's automatically approved. Or so if you don't do any action on it. So if you haven't like approved it or disapproved it or sent anything, then yes, you would have to, it would be automatically approved. I don't know what all the processes are for your city, so I'm sorry if my language is not
well, no, I'm
right,
just,
but
if you can send you can send a letter saying we got it, we need more stuff, you know, it sounds like it's similar to the permit streamlining process versus act is a little bit different, but we'll read up on it. And then what's for lunch? I'm just kidding.
it is a buffet lunch with lots of options.
Okay.
So, Adam, I have you in my queue for asking a question, but I also have Western Municipal in the queue right ahead of you, and when that popped up, Brenda wasn't in her seat yet, so I'm guessing you pushed her button too.
No. That'll be correct, sir.
Oh.
I have mine on too.
You pushed your button.
Yeah.
Did you push Brenda's button?
No.
No, I did.
Okay, all right. So
swear.
you're done, Adam.
Yes, sir.
Now it's Temecula's turn.
So Aaron, did you give us a number? Is there a bill number?
No, it's just proposed regulations. You're talking about the cannabis, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's not attached to any particular bill. Basically, they can just implement regulations.
Yes.
A little bit of what we're hearing is that this is coming from the governor's office. So it'll be tough.
And the 14th, what's happening on the 14th exactly? Is it not a
They're
hearing?
doing 3, I guess they're sort of like hearings to present the regulations. So one's in Sacramento, one's in the Bay Area, and then one's in LA.
Okay. All on the 14th?
No, they're different days.
Different days? Okay.
But the 14th is the LA one.
Okay, then I will email you about this.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Okay, Casey, how about your staff report? And then we have someone who wants to speak on one of the items.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Casey Daly, Director of Energy and Environmental Programs here at WRCOG. Just a quick refresher, WRCOG's PACE programs provide financing to finance energy efficient, renewable energy, water conservation, and seismic improvements to residential and commercial properties. That financing is then repaid on the property tax bill. Supervisor Washington, as you mentioned, we've got a full agenda today, so I'll get right to it. We've got 7 items up for consideration today, covering both our commercial and residential PACE programs. First things first, a program update. Collectively, the WRCOG PACE program has completed just under 87,100 projects for a total of almost $1.85 billion. So we're still moving along in the right direction. So the first item today deals with adding an additional PACE provider, adding Y-Green as an additional PACE provider to the WRCOG PACE umbrella. Just a bit of a refresher on Y-Green. They've been operational since 2010. They're based in Petaluma, California. They've got about 304 employees and operate both commercial and residential PACE programs. Back in October of 2017, the Executive Committee directed staff to enter into contract negotiations and execute any necessary documents to bring in Y-Green under the WRCOG PACE umbrella. So that's what we're here today to do. Since then, WRCOG staff and Y-Green staff and our legal team have worked together to update all of the various documents required for WRCOG to oversee the program. These would include the master indenture, bond documents, program report and handbook, assessment contract, and various agreements. One thing I want to take a second to talk about is that Y-Green's bond structure differs from our other PACE providers, and so as a result of that, we're asking the Executive Committee to consider Resolution 37-18, which would prompt a judicial validation filing for the courts to validate the type of bond structure that Y-Green is proposing to use. Also want to note that Y-Green has requested to not only operate the residential but also the commercial program. So we're going to make sure that all of the validation actions include both commercial and residential, so at the point in time where everybody's ready to come back to approve the commercial program, all of those documents have been validated. We expect the validation action to take about 6 months. That should be filed here this week or next. So we're hopeful that early next year, Y-Green will be up and running and operational within the program. All right, our next item deals with the levy of assessments. As part of the annual processing of the assessments on the tax roll, WRCOG is required to adopt resolutions making various representations that we have the authority to levy the assessments, that we're following all applicable laws, and that we are either exempt or in compliance with Prop 218. This is the last of 2 previous months worth of levy assessments, and so this is just a cleanup for the counties of Shasta and Solano County. So those were resolutions 38-18 and 40-18. Okay, our next item deals with a judicial foreclosure on one of our commercial PACE parcels. WRCOG's master indenture provides that when a parcel is delinquent, WRCOG is to initiate a judicial foreclosure or defer the judicial foreclosure process. As most all of you are aware, every year historically we come and we defer all of the delinquencies in lieu of judicial foreclosure. However, this particular property has been delinquent on taxes and assessment payments since April of 2016, and at the request of the bondholder, they requested the WRCOG initiate the judicial foreclosure process. Resolution 39-18 authorizes WRCOG General Counsel to cause an action to be brought in Superior Court to foreclose the assessment lien on the delinquent property and require payment of all costs and attorney fees. I just want to say something here. With the commercial program, some of you have heard that these property owners are a little bit more sophisticated sometimes than our residential property owners, and so although we have made numerous attempts, letters, phone calls to the property owner to get them to come current, we've even offered them a payment plan, they have still dragged their feet. And so in talking to the bondholder as well as legal counsel, it's been made clear that yes, they are a little bit more sophisticated, and until they see some of these formal actions through the courts, they might be reluctant to actually come current. So this is a necessary step for us to make sure that all of the bondholders are made whole as part of our program. Okay, our next item deals with amending Resolution 35-17. Back in July of last year, the Executive Committee approved Resolution 35-17 that would make seismic improvements eligible improvements in our commercial PACE program. When the resolution was first adopted, it was adopted as an opt-in, which meant all of the jurisdictions that participate within our program would have to pass a resolution approving the changes to the program. With over 380 jurisdictions statewide, 50 counties statewide, getting those resolutions adopted one by one kind of became a very difficult process. So what we're recommending here is to come back and just revise this resolution to make it opt-out versus opt-in. And the item that I'm going to talk about next will illustrate that. But what you're going to see is that seismic improvements on commercial pace projects can become very large and very, very lucrative. So my segue into this is we're looking to bring in an additional PACE provider for our commercial PACE program. Just 12 o'clock today, our PACE ad hoc committee met and received a presentation by Clean Fund. Clean Fund is a commercial PACE only provider based out of Sausalito. They operate commercial PACE in 19 states. And when I was talking about seismic just a second ago, Clean Fund is actually the company that's originated the largest commercial PACE project in the United States, which was a $40 million project, all seismic retrofits. So you know what, maybe we should rethink how we do seismic so that we can get more of these projects through. So the ad hoc committee met earlier this afternoon and came out with a unanimous recommendation to authorize the executive director to move forward with contract negotiations to bring Clean Fund back, to add them both within the WRCOG subregion, and since they are commercial only, they would be allowed to come back at the within our statewide program as well. And finally, we have a public hearing.
Yeah.
On June 19th, the City of Pismo Beach passed a resolution to become an associate member of WRCOG so they can operate the California HERO program. This past July 2nd, the Executive Committee adopted Resolution 34-18 to set and hold a public hearing today, and so we're here to hold a public hearing as well. With all of that, that completes my presentation, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, and I know we have staff from Y-Green here as well as Clean Fund in case there are any questions for Clean Fund.
Yeah, so I have a couple people in the queue here to ask questions. Then I'll bring the speaker up, and then we can have some dialogue after we hear from the public.
Yes, sir.
So the first person in the queue is Harupa Valley.
Okay, no, I am on. There's a reflection on this, so I can't tell what's lit up. I apologize. Just wanted to get clarification on the Y-Green, that you mentioned that their bond structure is different from what WRCOG uses. Is there a reason for that, and is this like a kind of normal thing to go and get this validation? Their bond structure is the bond structure that they use with their other bond issuers. They work with another JPA called Golden State Finance Authority, and so they have an existing program set up that's their bond structure is one of a drawdown bond. So without getting into all the weeds here, it's just a different way of providing capital to actually fund the projects. And since it differs from the way that our bond and our program was set up originally with the HERO program and then our subsequent providers, it was determined that we needed to go back and have a validation so that the courts can bless this proposed structure for Y-Green to operate within our program. Okay, so it'll allow Y-Green to use it, but only Y-Green? With
Correct.
Us? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, next speaker is City Hemet.
Hi, Casey.
Hi, Bonnie.
So going through this judicial foreclosure process and the commercial or residential property owners going, kind of playing this late in the game deal, are they ever held liable for the incurred costs that it's taken to a certain point of the process? If in fact they ultimately then decide, oh yeah, okay, we'll pay attention. But I would imagine that there's certainly significant incurred costs, and who pays for that?
So what I might defer one of these to our general counsel, but as part of the resolution that the executive committee is considering, we would, it also requires that the property owner
cover all applicable legal expenses, attorney fees, penalties, and so forth. Now, I don't know if that answers completely your question. Steve, do you have any? Okay.
Warren Diven with Best and Krieger. The state law that authorizes the judicial foreclosure proceedings does allow WRCOG to recover their attorney's fees and costs in the event that we should be successful in the foreclosure action, or in the event that the property owner wants to redeem, that is, bring their assessments current. We would also include the attorney's fees and costs as part of the price for them to do that.
Great, thanks.
Okay, City of Calamasa.
Yes, in light of all the recent wildfires the last several years, and thousands of homes have been burnt down, and if we've done 86,000 projects, mostly in California, I've got to think that there's been some overlap, and I'm just curious about how this works. I know there's a lot of times a home is burned down completely and may not be rebuilt for several years, if ever. How does this go? You're on the tax rolls. Does the fire insurance come in and take care of everything, or do they keep it, rebuild it, and everything goes back to the same way it was right before? It seems to me that there could be some unique challenges in this with so many homes, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for the question. So you touched on something that we've been looking at for a little while now. One of the things that we're looking at doing is adding in language. Really, once the property gets improved and they've added in new solar, as an example, we're encouraging all property owners to go back and have their insurance adjusted to make sure that they're covering those improvements, those sometimes $30,000 to $40,000 worth of improvements as part of their insurance coverage. So that's something that we're adding looking to add from a disclosure standpoint, and then it becomes a matter of if a property is totally damaged and gone, the assessment does stay with the property, but that's where the insurance and the insurance part of it needs to come into play. Is that property owners need to update their insurance policy so that it accounts for those improvements. So in the event of a natural disaster like this, they have coverage because the assessment still will stay with the property.
So my concern too, and like you say, when you're going out and selling these people the program, as long as that's put out there, really, that they know that, because I think that'd be pretty important. It doesn't matter until some of these big things happen, but we're talking about thousands of homes in the last.
You're absolutely right. I mean, we look at our counterparts up north in Sonoma County who were devastated by the fires last year. A lot of these changes, we're working with them on seeing how they're addressing it so that we can implement similar practices down here, because that's just an awful situation.
I'd like to see reports coming in the future too on how that's going. But
absolutely.
Thanks
absolutely.
a lot. Yeah.
Okay, Eastern Municipal.
Yes, I guess just a point of clarification on the seismic retrofit.
Sir, can you turn your mic on,
It's
please?
on. Just you got to move your mic. There you go.
Okay, on the seismic retrofit expansion, are there any potential legal ramifications for expanding it beyond what the original agreement was for these jurisdictions, and allowing just for the opt-out as opposed to the opt-in? Could they be caught off guard, or are we notifying them?
Well, we will absolutely notify all of the jurisdictions if the board elects to make this revision, so that the jurisdictions know that this has been made, this change to the program has been made. Seismic improvements in your jurisdictions are now allowed. What we also do is we also send a copy of the opt-out resolution. So we have a resolution that at any time if a city doesn't want to allow either a particular provider or a particular type of improvement, we have an opt-out resolution that's been drafted up. And so what we'll do is we'll notify the jurisdictions that seismic is now readily available in their jurisdiction, and if they choose not to have it, here is a resolution that they can adopt to pull that back.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Casey. I'm going to invite Ms. Crawford up to speak. She has public comment to make.
Right. Thank you very much.
Chairman Washington, I'm just here available for questions if needed. Good afternoon.
Well, the only question I had earlier was the direction Facebook stock was going to go, but I got an answer to that, so
Great.
thank you.
Very much. Pleasure being here.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Casey. You need a variety of actions
Yes, sir.
from us, so I'm going to ask if there's a brave soul up here on the dais who's willing to make that motion.
Excuse
Do we
me,
need to
Mr.
conduct a
Chair.
public hearing first?
Oh, yeah,
Thank you, sir.
public hearing's open.
Do we have any callers online for the California Hero Program?
Is there anyone here who would like to speak besides Ms. Crawford? Can I close the public hearing now?
Of course.
Public hearing's closed. Okay, where were we? We were waiting on a motion. Just push that button. On top of the screen says mover. So we have a motion by Banning and a second by Wildemar. Please register your votes. That motion carries 18-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Casey. Very thorough. All right, we'll move on down to 6C, presentation on Santa Ana watershed project. Okay.
Gosh, I'll get this mic someday. And Mike, Dr. Antos, just one brief introduction for you. I just wanted to welcome you today and thank you for coming. Most of you probably know I serve as the WRCOG representative to the One Water, One Watershed Steering Committee, fondly known as OWOW. Which I'm glad someone told me the very first time because I thought it was ow, ow. So.
Just on Mondays.
Only on Monday. Well, that might be today. So there's a lot going on at SAPA, which is the Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority, and OWOW falls under that umbrella. And so I have learned a whole lot of new information about water in general and about the watershed and about the Santa Ana River, and I thought that you all might want to just at least get a glimpse into that, because it's very, I'm constantly learning. So I just want to welcome you today and thank you for coming to make the presentation. And you will see one of your consent items are some of the late reports that I have done from some of the past meetings. So those are for your availability today as well. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Vice Chair Otten, and members of the committee. Thanks for having me here today, and I'm glad to tell you a little bit about what we've been working on over at the Santa Ana Watershed Project Authority in the One Water, One Watershed program. And as you heard, this is the Oh Wow program. She stole my joke with the ow ow. We always use that one. So this is a program that includes our region's response to the Integrated Regional Water Management Program in the state of California. It is that and more. So as you may know, the Integrated Regional Water Management Program has 12 funding regions in the state, as you can see on this map. The Santa Ana Watershed is one of those funding regions. It's number 5, the orange one down there in the bottom, the south end of the state. And in the program, SAPA is the state-approved regional water management group for that program. And what ends up happening is the legislature, when it passes water bonds, directs resources to this funding area as component of the Integrated Regional Water Management Program. And those funds come in and can provide planning grants. There's currently a disadvantaged community involvement program, which I won't talk much about today, that's being funded through the program. And soon there will be implementation grants, probably in the beginning of 19, coming from the state through this program. So as I said, there's 3 current activities inside the OWOW program. One is our update of the plan. So the One Water, One Watershed Plan Update 2018 is underway. The second is the Disadvantaged Communities Involvement Program, funded by a state grant. And the third is Proposition 1 implementation grants, as I mentioned. I'm only going to talk about number 1 and 3 today, and on a day with a less packed agenda, I'd be happy to come back and talk about number 2, if that is of interest. So the OWOW steering committee that was mentioned has 11 members representing the political entities and community members around the watershed. We have a county supervisor from each of the 3 counties, Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside. We have a city elected representative from each of the counties, one from Orange, San Bernardino, and Riverside. We have a member of the Santa Ana Regional Water Quality Control Board. One of the appointed board members is on the steering committee. 2 SAPA commissioners, and then a member of the environmental nonprofit organization. At the moment, it's Gary Brown, who's the executive director of Orange County Coastkeeper. And then we have a member of the business community that represents sort of that thinking of things. And the steering committee is responsible for a number of things, one of which is helping us set the goals for our planning, which then lead to the kinds of implementation projects that we seek to achieve. So the goals that have been set for the plan update are these 6 here. There's much more information on my slides than I plan on presenting today, but I know the slides are an attachment that people can reference in the future. But we have 6 important goals here that are more than just about water. They're about water and watersheds and community and the community's relationship with water and watersheds. In this particular plan, we've added 2 goals that the steering committee supported the addition of 2 goals to make sure that we have education and trust between people and organizations, and that we improve our data integration, tracking, and reporting. These are new ways of thinking inside our planning, and it was brought forward by the steering committee. The way the plan gets written is by what we call pillar work groups. There are 10 work groups that are convened by water leaders. Each one has a chair that is a leader in the water field in the watershed, and it is inclusive of volunteer effort from agencies and the community. Between the 10 pillars this time around, we had probably about 160 different people all contributing to the plan, literally writing. So I was helping facilitate the co-authorship by about 160 people of a plan that's supposed to be about 200 pages long. So it's a fascinating, fun project. And they look at the goals that have been set and say, how are we going to achieve them? What should our management strategies be? What should our policy strategies be? Also in the plan is a list of projects, and this is a current call for projects that's open now. And members at the cities that you represent or the agencies that you represent can go to our website, sapa.org/OWOW, and there's a call for projects there to be submitted into the plan. Anything that gets submitted will be part of the plan once it gets finalized at the end of the year. Now, the ability to get in the plan is now open permanently. Anything that's in the database will get swept into the plan when we finish it. Going forward, there's other reasons to be in the plan, and in the future you'll be able to submit your projects, and the steering committee will be able to adopt them into the plan. One of the other process innovations led by the steering committee this time is that we looked at lots of the regional plans that have been made recently and just dragged all of their projects into our database too, so that if your project was submitted, for instance, to the River Parkway and Open Space Plan, we've now dragged it into our plan as well, so it's covered in both places. And as you can see, there's a bunch of reasons why you want your project in there. One, your project has to be in the plan in order to compete for the implementation grants. There's also a new rule in California for stormwater resources management, where if you want any grant from the state related to stormwater, your project has to be in an IRWM plan. There's also an opportunity to use the prestige of being in the plan for pursuing other funding. You can say to the US EPA, for instance, that your project is supported by a regional plan, and that's a good way to try to draw resources from other funding opportunities. And then there's also nonprofits and other partners that like to have their projects in there just for the visibility or the prestige. And then, of course, we incentivize and pursue collaborative and multi-benefit work for our communities in the watershed, and by having you in the database, it's really easy to notice if your project is in the same spot that somebody else is planning on doing something, and now you can build a collaborative project. So the implementation grants that are on the way from the Department of Water Resources, they keep pushing their timeline back, but we now understand that what's called a PSP, or their solicitation package for grants, we're expecting to see the draft in about 4 weeks, we think. Sometime in September, they've told us. Then there's a period of public comment across the state on that draft, then it becomes final, and our region starts working together to put together a proposal of a suite of projects that we're going to submit as our regional grant. This will all be happening through the fall and into the winter. Probably March or April is when the final proposal will be due. This slide way more than I'm going to tell you about, but just to know that there are eligibility languages inside Proposition 1, which is where the resources are coming from. So it talks about the kinds of projects that they want to fund. It talks about who's eligible to receive grants. And this time with Proposition 1, which is a new innovation, is both federally recognized Indian tribes, California Native American tribes, and mutual water companies are all eligible to receive grants. In a way, in the past, they always had to find a fiscal sponsor partner. Also, unlike earlier, there's a 50% cost share requirement, so $1 to $1. However, it can be waived if your project is benefiting disadvantaged communities. There's a lot more complexity to this, but I'm trying to give you the highlights and get done in 7 minutes. How am I doing? Okay. So here's my last slide is where we are now. So right now we've got our call for projects is open, and we're working our way towards the OWOW Plan Update 2018 being finalized. I think probably beginning of September we'll be out for public comment with our draft plan. So that'll be a 4 or 6 week public comment period so that everyone will get noticed of it. The draft PSP from the state is also due in September, so we'll start to get an understanding of how many resources and what kinds of projects they're pursuing, what they'll be available. Then in the fall, we'll be switching from a call for projects of being in the plan to a call for projects who want to pursue grants. You can be in the plan without pursuing these particular grants, but you can't pursue these grants without being in the plan. So we'll switch to a call for projects wishing to receive grants, and then we have a very sophisticated political evaluation process of all those proposed projects to sort out which are the highest priority, which are the ones that are going to compete the best in the state proposal, and what's the right suite for our watershed. So the final suite of projects we'll propose to the state probably in January or February. DWR comes down and have a big meeting with us. And then sometime in the winter, we'll be approving the plan update. We hope in November, but not for sure. And then we'll be applying to the state. So hopefully by May or June, we'll have grant dollars from the state. Now the reason why I keep saying hopefully is that this particular grant opportunity from the state was originally supposed to be released about 18 months ago. And they've gone through a bunch of process changes and senior staff changes, so everything's been very delayed, which has actually benefited our region because we have been able to do a much more sophisticated planning process to make sure we've got the right things in place to pursue these dollars. We probably could have spent them if they've given to us a year and a half ago, but I think we'll be able to do a much better job because we had the extra time. So that is my high density, very fast presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions if there's time. I'm also happy to return if at any point you have additional information you want from me.
Okay, I don't have anyone in the queue with questions, but I'll give you that opportunity now to ask questions if you'd like. Well, Doc, I think you answered everybody's questions. That's always
Thanks,
a good
sir.
thing.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Great presentation. We will move on to, let's see, where are we? 6D.
Yes.
CalPERS update, and my agenda says we have someone from Best and Krieger, Isabel Safi. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I will be giving you a very quick presentation on CalPERS. All of you know that you can't really do justice to the topic in just a few minutes, but if you have any questions, either during or after, I'm more than happy to address those questions. I've got a presentation that I'm happy to go off topic, again, if you want me to go in a particular direction on this. So this is just designed to give you a quick overview of how CalPERS, the CalPERS program works. Benefits are funded with 3 different sources: employer contributions, employee contributions, and investments. Interesting to note that CalPERS assumes that about 61% of funding for these benefits comes from investment earnings. So as investments miss the mark, you will see a significant increase in the other 2 forms of funding for benefits. And since employee contributions are generally fixed, it's the employer contribution portion that will increase. And there are several different reasons for that aside from investment gains, and we'll go over that in just a minute. But you'll see that, or many of you are seeing, significant increases in your contribution rates, and part of that is because of CalPERS not being in a position where it's meeting its investment expectations. Now, over the last couple of years, they've been doing better than they have in the past. So, for example, this last fiscal year, they recorded an 8.6 return in their investment gains. The prior year, 11.2, but the 2 years before that were significantly below the then 7.5% assumed rate of return. So over the long term, they've seen that their investment returns have missed the mark, which is part of the reason that they adjusted their assumed rate of return, which we'll discuss in just a minute. For your purposes, the WRCOG member contribution portion of it, there's a classic group and a PEPRA group. Your classic employees have been paying their own share of contributions for a couple of years now. It's an 8%. And then your PEPRA employees have a fixed contribution, or I shouldn't say fixed, have a contribution that's set by CalPERS. The fund operates by pooling investments jointly and investing those funds in a variety of different sources of funding. There have been reports about the types of funds that have been approved by CalPERS and the effect that those funds have had on the overall health of the fund itself. But ultimately, the board has a lot of broad authority with respect to how its funds are invested, and there isn't much that one can do except register concerns about how those funds are being invested. The required employer contribution, the piece that impacts the agency significantly, is based on a variety of different factors. It's based on the formula in effect for your employees. For your classic members, that is a 2.7 at 55 formula with a 1-year final compensation period. It's based on the types of employee groups that are covered. WRCOG only has miscellaneous employees, so your contribution obligations are more modest than, say, a city government from which many of you represent, that also have safety employees that have a much more significant cost associated with those benefits. And then, of course, a significant component of it are the status of your assets, to what extent your plan liabilities are funded. And many plans are significantly or not at a point where they're funded close to 100%. I believe that the WRCOG funded status is around the 74-76%. The contribution rate is comprised of two components: normal cost, which is the percentage or the cost of the present year of benefits that are accrued by your current employees. That is based on a percentage of payroll. And then the more significant part of your expenses are unfunded liabilities, and that's to the extent that your accrued liabilities exceed your plan assets. And that accrued, unfunded accrued liability is then paid over currently it's roughly about a 30-year period. It amortizes that liability over a 30-year period, and then there's fixed monthly or annual payments that are made to pay down that unfunded liability. When CalPERS considers what factors to use to come up with your contribution for a particular agency, it looks at two different categories of factors. Demographic assumptions, which are essentially the life expectancy of a particular participant in the program, the expected amount of time that they will work and accrue benefits. The life expectancy aspect of it is how long they're expected to draw benefits from the system. The rate at which salaries are increasing, the higher the salary, the higher the benefit value will be, and the higher the cost to the agency. The expected retirement age, and whether or not there will be disability retirements. And then economic assumptions, the more significant one of that, of course, are the expected investment returns. So this graph just shows that over time, CalPERS has seen a significant change in demographics, so that in 2001, there were 2 active employees for every retiree. In 2016, there was 1.31 active employees for every retiree. In the next 10 to 20 years, there will be 0.6 active employees for every retiree. Now, that made a significant difference back when contributions to CalPERS by an employer were combined into one single, the normal cost and unfunded liability were both combined, and they were based on payroll. And so CalPERS separated those two because as payroll was decreasing as compared to retiree benefits, they were seeing a significant underfunding of pension plans. And so noticing the significant difference in the proportion between active employees and retirees, CalPERS about 5-6 years ago split the contribution obligations into that normal cost and the unfunded cost that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So liabilities are affected primarily by investment returns, but also by experience gains and losses as compared to assumptions. So the longer a retiree lives and draws benefit from the assumptions, then the greater rate at which liabilities will increase. The longer somebody works, the greater the benefit that they're accruing will cost. And since the employer in a defined benefit plan bears the risk of unfunded liabilities and losses in the market, then that increases the cost for employers as well. PEPRA, back in 2013 was its implementation, is expected to eventually reduce costs, but only as PEPRA employees start significantly outnumbering classic employees, which is at a very modest rate currently, and so any significant impact or differences because of PEPRA are not expected for quite some time. And then the other significant factor are changes in CalPERS's actuarial assumptions and policies, which is probably part of what many of you are interested in hearing about, what exactly is contributing to these significant increases in costs. This is just an interesting chart that shows you how the funded status of the system has changed over time. One very interesting note here is that orange box right there. This is drawn from CalPERS's reports, and that orange box is intended to indicate that the retroactive benefits that came out of SB 400 tend to come up a lot in conversations with CalPERS recently as a primary source of the system being underfunded at this point. And they go out of their way to saying, look, that's in the past. Those costs have been paid long ago. There are other factors that are impacting the increase in liabilities, and certainly the biggest factor being the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. So investment returns, they are based on a discount rate. Also a term used to define expected or reference expected returns. It's important because it's not only used to, well, its primary function is to determine to what extent your benefits are going to be funded over the long term. And to the extent that they meet those goals, they're discounting your obligations, your debts to CalPERS for accrued liability by that percentage amount. About 4 or 5 years ago, it used to be 7.75%. It was reduced to 7.5% in 2014, and then in 2016, the board agreed to or approved a further reduction in the discount rate from 7.5% to 7% over a 3-year phase-in period. And that's because if you look at the investment returns that CalPERS has experienced over the last 20 years, the average return has been about 7.6%. And so they want to be more consistent with what the market actually is returning. And then there's recently, back in December of last year, there were significant changes that were made in the amortization policies, the period over which unfunded liabilities are going to be financed. As I said earlier, your current unfunded liabilities are generally financed over a 30-year period. As of for future unfunded liabilities that accrue, CalPERS will now be using a 20-year amortization period. So that means that your unfunded liabilities on an annual basis will be higher, but you will also be paying them quicker over time, which means your costs, your interest component of borrowing that amount over an extended period will also be lower. So you'll see a significant uptick in cost up front, but over time, your costs are expected to be less. And as the slide indicates, agencies are not expected to experience an impact to their contribution obligations because of the change in the amortization period until the 2021-22 fiscal year. One of the common questions that we get is, does CalPERS really have the authority to do this? Do they understand that they're having a significant impact on the bottom line for agencies who are struggling to be able to meet their contribution obligations while also having to meet their obligation to provide core services? And the answer to that is that CalPERS has been given a significant amount of discretion. So long as they're able to demonstrate with sufficient investigation and studies and reports that their contribution calculations are reasonable in light of actuarial assumptions, demographic assumptions, the amortization policies. If they can demonstrate that, then they essentially have broad authority on the basis that their obligation is not to minimize the pain to public employers, but it is to ensure that the system is well funded or adequately funded to meet its obligations to retirees. And then finally, this is just a quick overview of where WRCOG's own plan, how it has changed over the last 3 years. The data here is as of the last annual valuation, which issued last August. It's based on demographic data 2 years prior to that. And you'll see that there's been a modest increase in the normal cost, a more noticeable increase in the unfunded liability portion of it. Again, because the unfunded actuarial liabilities are based on essentially how long benefits are drawn for, what the investment gains or losses are. And so those tend to change significantly. And as CalPERS is making assumption changes that favor the funded status of the plan or the plan getting sufficient funding, you see a more significant impact on the unfunded liability portion of it. You've got two plans, a classic plan and a pepper plan, so that's what you see there. And then looking ahead, you can and should expect increases in your contribution obligations due to a decrease in the discount rate, the shorter amortization period going forward, and increases in unfunded liability because of performance in the investment returns over a longer period of time and changes in demographic assumptions as well. But because the WRCOG plan is focused or only has miscellaneous employees, the impact to the agency will likely be more modest than when compared to agencies that have safety employees as well. And that's it just for prepared remarks, but as I said, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have either now or at a later point.
Looks like Calamesa has a question for you.
Yes, Ms. Safey, could you, could I have a copy of this afterwards before you get away? That's a really good, and then it's kind of a double whammy when they use, you could easily insert the word taxpayers instead of employer. We're misleading by saying these are employers. We're not employers, you know, so let's just put the word taxpayer in there. And also, 3 of the things that were politically unpopular that the board went ahead and got rid of, I believe it was coal, tobacco, and firearms, were very profitable. But also it's a double whammy because public employees should be using all 3 of those things more often so that they don't live so darn long. I'm teasing.
I would hope so.
But we're still nibbling around the edges, and of course, as it refers to this body, like you say, since there's no public safety employees or whatever, it's almost manageable.
Yeah, and what we've started to see with some agencies who have significant resources and don't want to put that money in CalPERS because they're concerned that the board may have other interest in how they invest funds, is that they go and they invest those monies in Section 115 trusts that are being established by other parties with the idea that they have a much broader ability to generate significant returns because they're not so constrained by societal pressures, perhaps, on how funds should be invested, in this idea that the board really should be focused on the health of the fund and generating revenue rather than focusing on maybe where those investment gains are received from. But again, the board has broad authority to do what they feel is best and in the best interest of the system as a whole, and that's why you see a lot of popularity in the 115 Trust movement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. I asked for this presentation here at WRCOG because our CalPERS liability, unfunded liability at the county has grown significantly over the last few years. And recently, I'd say 3 months ago, I began to really understand the employer side of the equation. And we have a significant contingent of safety personnel who we are paying the higher rate for. And so it's been very challenging. And I was completely unaware prior to digging a little deeper about that. And then I'd say a couple months ago, I was in Sacramento representing the county with the State Association of Counties. And we actually had a presentation from the, I can't remember exact title, Executive Director of CalPERS.
Marcy Frost?
Yeah. And she was able to explain some of the calculations as to how we arrive at that discount rate, how we arrive at what a public agency's liability is, how it's calculated. And then in the private sector some years ago, as a airline pilot for Delta, Delta made the decision to terminate its pilot pension plan that was defined benefit and moved to a defined contribution plan. And at the time, it was very concerning to us. But I think for the newer employees who were coming in and had a significant amount of time for their defined contributions to grow in their name, as opposed to relying on an entity to pay out that monthly retirement check, I thought it just warranted some further discussion. I know in the public sector, there are constraints on how retirement or pensions can be managed. But I just thought it would benefit all of us to understand a little bit better what our responsibility is as electeds who have employees that are in the CalPERS system.
And one comment to something you said earlier, that one of the reasoning for the more aggressive reform proposals that are being put out there in the public sector is the idea of modeling public pensions after private pensions. You know, private pensions are governed by a different set of laws than public pensions. ERISA only protects what's accrued to date, doesn't protect what accrues in the future, and so there's a lot more that there, truly the employer, the shareholders, have more flexibility in what can be done. With public pensions, the taxpayer, and that is a really good point, that it's ultimately the taxpayer who bears the burden of this. There's a vested rights, and as many of you know, there's a number of cases before the Supreme Court in California currently that many are hoping give the public agency who speaks for taxpayers more flexibility in how future benefits are accrued by employees. But it's a challenging situation for certain.
Sure, yeah. And I don't, certainly, I don't want to make a point of being hypercritical of CalPERS, but when you look at their rate of return, especially from the Great Recession forward, for many folks, privately. A significant portion of my pension lost its value as the Dow plummeted. But I didn't sell anything. I didn't lock in those losses. I just was patient, and it all came back. It seems that around that same time, CalPERS was making some fairly poor decisions about their investment portfolio.
Knee-jerk reactions as opposed to a longer-term view, which is really what a retirement board should be doing, right? You don't respond to what happens at any given time. You look at it over time.
You don't panic.
Right.
Yeah, so, well, thank you. Anyone else have questions, comments? I appreciate that. Was very thorough. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would come down to item number 7, a report from Technical Advisory Committee Chair. And so at this time, it's been tradition that when the chair is a city council member, the city manager usually serves as the TAC chair. In our case, in my case as a county supervisor, that counterpart would be our Chief Executive Officer, George Johnson. So I've invited him to at least take a seat at the dais with us, but he has not actually been selected yet by the committee, but I fully anticipate that he will be. So George, I give you an opportunity to speak if you'd like.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for inviting me to participate with you this afternoon. There is quite some risk about what the TAC will do, so we'll see what happens next month, right?
Yeah.
No, it's a pleasure to be here with you, and I look forward to joining you throughout the year in support of the executive committee. Maybe just one comment. The county is working on getting involved in an update for the 2020 census, and soon we will be reaching out to all of our cities to make sure that you're involved in that work effort as well. Obviously, it's very important that we have a proper count for the 2020 census so we can make sure that we get our fair of funding from the federal and state government. So when that rolls out, I'll be sure to bring that information back to the executive committee.
Thank you, George. It will be my intention, and we're all the way in August now, and so I've served as the chair of the board since the beginning of the year. But one of the cornerstones of what I'm trying to do is focus more on a one county approach. Of our 2.4 million residents, 2 million live in cities. And so it behooves us at the county to understand what's going on in our cities, to work with our cities. We have a number of issues that we share, not the least of which homelessness, something that we need to tackle together. And so those issues are things that I think present us an opportunity in a forum to discuss and to work together in a collaborative fashion. So I look forward to George's input as we move through the rest of this year. Next is reports from committee representatives, SCAG, AQMD, and CalCog. Do we have any comments from any representatives from SCAG committees? No? There were no SCAG meetings. That's a good thing, right? I just shouldn't have said that. How about AQMD?
No, same with AQMD. We were dark this month, so no major updates.
Okay, but you're going to have some at the next meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And CalCog?
CalCog meets quarterly, so there's no meeting, but they continue to update on their website the bills that they're tracking along with the League of Cities. So if anyone is interested in some of the bills, go to the CalCog website, and they keep an update on the bills and the changes and what they're supporting and not supporting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brian. Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First wanted to introduce an administrative intern that's been working with us through the summer, Pedro Ramos. Pedro, there you are. Could you stand up? Thank you very much. So he'll be with us through the summer, so we appreciate his work working with us on some HR issues. I just wanted to mention the two presentations we had today. They're via request of the Executive Committee, and then in the queue upcoming over the course of the next few months when time allows and we can fit them in, are additional presentations also that have been requested by the Executive Committee. I think next month we will have our homelessness update. As you know, we have provided some funds to groupings of jurisdictions, and we'll be getting reports back to you out of those committees. Next item, I think several of you may have attended last Friday the ribbon cutting for a number of Clinton and Keith roadway improvements, including what I think is the county's first wildlife overpass, which was pretty interesting. And we prepared or had prepared a video, and we'd like to show that to you to recap that event. Hopefully it works.
You know, we moved here in Southwest Riverside County in '89, so we've been here almost 30 years. But through all of those years and watching the communities grow and the infrastructure not keeping up was real challenging.
I was part of the RCIP process back in 2000 where we were trying to study, we were just drawing lines on a map of how we get from there to here. So this was a line on a map.
This is like a promise kept. We promised that we'd get certain projects done, and this is one of the most important for the region.
Thank you all so much for coming out for what really will be a historic day for Riverside County. All of you will one day look back and tell your kids, your grandkids, family, and friends, I was there when they opened Clinton Keith Road.
There are a lot of people that are going to benefit. We have people that are on this side of town that drive their kids to school, and it's probably going to knock 45 minutes off of their commute time. And it also has, different transportation modes. You can walk, you can bike. It's really a modern-day road for a modern community.
It's awesome. It's really exciting to see everybody get together. This is going to be a really fast lane for us.
Isn't this a cool bridge? We have in Riverside County, we don't necessarily have in a lot of places throughout the state.
It's the first overcrossing that we've seen in Riverside County, the wildlife overcrossing, and it's a great compromise and balance between wildlife and roads.
The TUMP program was a huge contributor to this road in a lot of different ways. With our COG's approval, we were able a number of years ago to set up a funding mechanism where the fees that were coming from this development around here would go into bond sale for the county to be able to sell bonds and deliver this improvement.
And this is just a tremendous asset now to the community that addresses some of our infrastructure shortfall, but it could not have been done without WRCOG's leadership, without the transportation uniform mitigation fee, and everyone pitching in dollars that come into the coffers that then are used to get these projects done.
Yeah, so it's just a beautiful facility, and our thanks go to the county. They hosted a great event, as well as the city of Murrieta, RCTC certainly a partner, and then the TUMP program contributed about $17 million to this facility, and what was really cool about that was not only the finished product, but there were a number of individuals from jurisdictions outside of Murrieta that were there, so I think that there was a real understanding of the regional benefit of the project, so it was really, really good to see. And then lastly, wanted to show you a couple pictures. We have some new additions to the WRCOG family. This is Cynthia Mejia's baby boy Noah, who was born about a month ago. Cynthia is one of our staff analysts. In fact, she was put together the General Assembly this year, and I think just got worn out, and I think the next day she left to go have a baby, so she barely made it. And also, we wanted to introduce baby Axel Ruiz. Andrew is in first day back today. Andrew and his wife Carmen had baby Axel, and you can see on the right, baby Axel already boning up on TUMP program manuals. Also,
I was at the hospital. I got to help him deliver the baby.
We heard that you were at the hospital. And then also, Crystal Adams, who recently left us to go to the city of Eastvale, she's expecting this August. And then I see Tyler Masters in the audience. Tyler and his wife, Martha, are expecting sometime soon. So, I'm always impressed when people tell me how busy our staff is, and I want to say...
I was going to make a comment, but I won't.
Busy.
And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And that was a great celebration, the opening of the Clinton-Keith connection with close to 300,000 residents in that larger southwest area. It's not hard to imagine that road will benefit hundreds of thousands of people. So great accomplishment. The next item is items for future agendas. Someone would like to contribute an idea. City of Norco.
Yeah, I don't know how many people are experiencing this, maybe all of you, but when the redevelopment agency went away, if you were associated with the redevelopment agency as a staff or whatever, PERS, things like that were paid through that, and then for the first couple of years, those benefits and things were paid, healthcare, stuff like that. And now they've made the decision that, well, that goes back to the agency that they were kind of associated with. And I'm wondering if anybody's familiar with that in their cities?
Can you restate that?
Yeah, in other words, when you had a redevelopment agency, you had a staff that actually put in time, and the pension, credits, healthcare, things like that went to that agency, and then when it was absorbed into the state of California, the Department of Finance took on that debt. Well, all of a sudden they began to go, well, I don't think we're going to take that debt, and they began to not pay it out, leaving the cities liable for those debts. Every city's experiencing this. I'm just curious if maybe, Rick, we might be able to talk about that with, I'm trying to simplify it, but...
We'll look into it. We'll talk more and look into it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I think I understand.
Any other requests for items for future agendas? How about general announcements? Anyone have general announcements they'd like to make? Lake Elsinore, is that
Thank you. Yes, sir. We just had big fires here in Riverside County in Ottawa, and I think we lost 5 residents. So we really need to thank our
homes.
5 homes. And so we really need to thank our firefighters and all of our first responders, because we really dodged a bullet. If anyone's following a car fire that's up in the Redlands area, they've lost over 1,000 homes already, just homes, not to mention other structures. And so right now there's another fire that just broke out in Tribuca Canyon that's, on the backside of Lake Elsinore and Corona. And there's a fire that just broke out in Temescal Valley. So we just need to be thankful and support our firefighters and make sure that we're aware and remind folks of the fire dangers. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Hoopa Valley.
Thought of one thing, actually, Brian speaking reminded me. So this weekend I walked back in from running an errand, and my husband says to me, I've got a surprise for you. And I said, really? What? I like surprises. So he had been watching cable TV, a show called Angler Chronicles. And Lake Elsinore has an amazing episode on that show, and he recorded, I guess, about half of it for me. So impressed. And along with that, I'd like to mention Eastville's video that they have out called Limitless. It is another both of those are they're very different from each other. Obviously, one's a TV show, one's more of a video, but both excellent. So if you get a chance, look both of those up and can be proud of our West Riverside County cities.
Amazing count.
Thank you, Laura. Kelly, did you want to talk about the PD night out tomorrow, right, in Murrieta? Or was that all you were going to say? I just said it.
Well, it's a national night out for police, and so we're having it at Town Square Park at the same time our council meeting is, so none of us will be there. We'll be inside the building. And we've got quite a full agenda, too, with some fun stuff on it, so I imagine you'll get to visit with some of the folks that want to come and speak at that meeting. But anyway, it's a nice chance and opportunity for people to get out and mingle with our police officers and firefighters that are left. We have a few that are out on strike teams. Hopefully they'll come home safe. And anyway, but I believe National Night Out is not just in Murrieta, though. I think they have it all over. But thanks for putting me on the spot. Thanks.
I gave you a nice lead in. City of Hemet.
Yes, we'll be having our National Night Out again tomorrow night as well. Well, we're in a special council meeting, so none of us are going to be able to go there. But
I'll cover for both of you.
In years past, it's always been very well attended and very well supported by the community for what our public safety do day in and day out. So I'm sorry I can't be there with the rest of my council members, but perhaps we'll make it a quick meeting and be able to get the tail end of it.
Yay. Any other general announcements? If not, our next meeting will be September 10th at 2 p.m. here. And with that, we are adjourned.